EU country cracks down on Russian media. Estonia has banned more than 50 websites used to watch Russian TV channels. Estonia has blocked access to 53 websites that were used to watch banned Russian TV channels, the Baltic countries' Consumer Protection and Technical Regulatory Authority, TTJA, said on Wednesday. The regulator added that the crackdown was conducted in accordance with the EU sanctions on Russian media. TTJA Director General Kristi Talving cited a poll commissioned by the Estonian government, which found that the trust of Russian channels has fallen from 40% to 18%. Based on these numbers, we can say that the work to protect the Estonian information space has been effective, Talving said. Nearly 40% of people living in Estonia speak Russian, according to the official census. The country has had a sizable Russian minority from the time that it was part of the Soviet Union. The EU banned the broadcasting of content from multiple Russian news organizations, including RT, in response to Moscow's military operation in Ukraine, which was launched in February 2022. The EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, accused the news outlets of spreading disinformation. Estonia separately banned 6 Russian TV channels in February 2022. Next month, the TTJA blacklisted 7 outlets, including Channel 1 and news agency TASS. The Russian Foreign Ministry has described the ban on the country's news organizations in the EU as an act of censorship aimed at purging the information space of the presence of any media that is an alternative to Western media. Guerilla Group claims responsibility for Tatarsky bombing. The so-called National Republican Army, linked to former Russian MP Ilya Ponomarev, says it organized the blogger's murder. The St. Petersburg division of the so-called National Republican Army, NRA, has claimed it was behind the murder of military blogger Vladimir Tatarsky, according to a telegram statement shared by former Russian State Duma deputy Ilya Ponomarev. Ponomarev, who has been branded a foreign agent by Moscow, previously claimed to be the mouthpiece of the NRA, although there is no conclusive evidence that the group actually exists. According to the statement, the NRA carried out the attack against a group of Z activists and personally against the well-known arsonist and propagandist, war criminal Maxim Fomin, referring to Tatarsky's real name. The group insisted that the bombing was prepared and carried out by us autonomously, and without assistance from foreign forces or special services. The NRA also denied the involvement of Daria Trepova, who is the main suspect in the blogger's assassination. Tatarsky was killed in a bomb blast on Sunday during a meeting with followers at a cafe in the historic center of St. Petersburg. Trepova had handed him a figurine packed with explosives, which detonated shortly afterwards, killing him on the spot and injuring some 40 others. On Tuesday, the 26-year-old was charged with committing an act of terrorism while operating as part of an organized group, as well as with the illegal trafficking of explosive materials. Previously, the NRA also claimed responsibility for the murder of journalist Daria Dugina last August. Russian officials have claimed that the killings of Tatarsky and Dugina were both terrorist attacks orchestrated by Ukraine and its special services. The existence of the NRA or its involvement in the attacks have yet to be independently confirmed, and the only person claiming ever to have had contact with them is Ponomarev. Ponomarev served as a deputy in Russia's State Duma, the lower chamber of parliament, between 2007 and 2016. However, after objecting to Russia's reunification with Crimea in 2014, he moved to the U.S. 1 year later, he emerged as the prime suspect in an embezzlement case in Russia, and was arrested in absentia and placed on the international wanted list. He was officially relieved of his duties in the Duma in 2016. Ponomarev now resides in Ukraine, where he has received citizenship. He has repeatedly threatened to launch a terror campaign targeting Russian officials and anyone deemed to support Moscow's actions in Ukraine. Russia demands release of Ukrainian bishop. Metropolitan Pavel was arrested after accusing President Zelensky of religious persecution. Russia has demanded the release of Metropolitan Pavel, a senior bishop of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, OC, stating that it is concerned about his well-being. Pavel was taken into custody last week as Kiev sought to oust UOC monks from the historic monastery which he heads. In a statement on Wednesday, the Russian Foreign Ministry said it was angered by the Ukrainian government's pressure to remove the UOC from the Kiev-Petrovsk Lavra. It added that Moscow is worried about the monks and priests, who face the threat of a physical and moral crackdown, and claimed Pavel's arrest was a prime example of religious persecution. The leading bishop is being held under house arrest in electronic shackles, the statement remarked. It also condemned President Vladimir Zelensky for claiming last week that Ukraine was a bastion of religious freedom in our part of Europe. Russian diplomats branded the remarks the pinnacle of cynicism. We demand the immediate release of Metropolitan Pavel and his medical treatment, the Foreign Ministry said. Pavel was taken into custody last Saturday, after the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, accused him of inciting religious hatred and justifying and denying Russian military aggression. The court which ruled on his arrest was forced to interrupt proceedings when the senior cleric complained of health issues. Pavel was removed from Kiev and ordered to stay in a village 50 kilometers from the capital. The SBU has conducted raids on UOC churches and clerics, claiming to be looking for stockpiled weapons and evidence of treason. A report by the UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OCHR, said last month that the actions could be discriminatory, prompting a rebuke from Kiev. Days before his arrest, Pavel blamed Zelensky personally for the crackdown on the UOC, vowing that God will not forgive this action, neither to you nor to your family. The Russian Foreign Ministry accused Zelensky of insulting the UOC's ruling council by refusing to meet them and ignoring millions of people who support the church in Ukraine and beyond. The Kiev regime stubbornly ratchets up its policy of moral terror against citizens and the faithful, it said. Moscow also reiterated its criticism of the U.S. government for a failure to address the situation, claiming that this proved Washington cannot be an arbiter on religious freedom. U.S. reports on the issue are bogus propaganda and puny political hackery, the Foreign Ministry asserted. Suspect in Tatarsky terror attack remanded in custody. A Moscow court has ordered pre-trial detention for Daria Trepova. Daria Trepova, the prime suspect in the murder of prominent Russian military blogger Vladimir Tatarsky, has been placed in pre-trial detention. The decision was announced by a Moscow court on Tuesday, shortly after Trepova was charged with terrorism by Russia's investigative committee. The hearings took place behind closed doors on request of investigators, with the court supporting the motion despite opposition from Trepova and her legal team. The suspect will remain in pre-trial custody for 2 months, which may be extended further if needed. Earlier in the day, Trepova was charged with committing an act of terrorism while operating as part of an organized group, as well as illegal trafficking of explosive materials. The offenses may result in up to 20 years behind bars if she's found guilty. According to the investigative committee, Trepova is the prime suspect in the assassination of Tatarsky, real name Maxim Fomin. She is believed to have brought a figurine loaded with explosives to an event at a cafe in central St. Petersburg, hosted by Tatarsky, on Sunday. She gave the blogger the figurine, which detonated shortly afterwards, killing him on the spot and injuring over 30 others. The suspect had been following the instructions of persons acting from the territory of Ukraine, the investigative committee noted. U.S. planning North Korea countermeasures with Asian allies. Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo will meet to consider ways to respond to alleged provocations by the DPRK. Top nuclear envoys from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan will hold a round of talks later this week on North Korea's nuclear arsenal and rising tensions on the Korean peninsula, including potential countermeasures against Pyongyang. The South Korean Foreign Ministry announced the upcoming talks during a Tuesday press briefing, noting that its chief nuclear negotiator, Kim Gun, would join his U.S. and Japanese counterparts for discussions in Seoul on April 7. At this meeting, the chief representatives of the three countries will share their assessment of the grave situation on the Korean peninsula following North Korea's recent series of provocations and discuss countermeasures, ministry spokesperson Lim Soo-seok told reporters. While it's unclear what kind of response the officials will consider, the planned meeting comes amid soaring tensions with the DPRK, which has conducted a large number of weapons tests in retaliation for continued US-led military drills with South Korea in recent months. Pyongyang has repeatedly denounced the exercises as rehearsal for an invasion, and insists on its right to develop its nuclear arsenal to defend against potential attack. Under President Joe Biden, Washington has pursued a more bellicose approach to North Korea than his predecessor, Donald Trump, who arranged several rare diplomatic meetings with leader Kim Jong-un. Biden has instead demanded that Pyongyang abandon its nuclear weapons, which the North has rejected as a non-starter. The U.S. State Department said Biden's special representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, would attend Friday's nuclear talks, arguing that ties with Japan and South Korea are critical to strengthening regional security. Despite a steady stream of warnings about the DPRK's weapons from American officials, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby told reporters last month that the government has seen no indications that North Korea is planning an imminent attack on the U.S. or its allies. U.S. to expand military training for Ukraine. Washington announced the move alongside a new $2.6 billion weapons package for Kiev. The Pentagon has said it is preparing to expand its training of Ukrainian forces, noting the instruction would focus on different types of weapons and maneuvers. While the U.S. has sought to accelerate its shipment of Abrams main battle tanks to Kiev, training on that platform has yet to begin. Speaking to reporters for a background briefing on Tuesday, a senior defense official said that in addition to a newly approved weapons package worth more than $2.6 billion, Washington has also expanded US-led training to focus on combined arms and joint maneuver operations. Though the official provided few details on the new training, they noted that 4,000 Ukrainian troops had recently completed instruction on the US-made Bradley fighting vehicle and the Stryker armored personnel carrier, both of which have been supplied to Kiev. Since fighting with Russia began last year, the Pentagon has trained more than 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers in total, many of them in Germany, the official added. However, asked about training for the M1 Abrams tank, which Washington has also agreed to ship to Ukraine despite initial reluctance, the official said it had not even started. As the military is still working on the equipment procurement, they could not provide an exact timeline for when it might begin, but hoped it could move forward relatively soon. After initially refusing to send battle tanks, President Joe Biden reversed course earlier this year when Germany said it would provide its own Leopard tanks, opting to ship 31 units. Deliveries were originally set to take up to 2 years, prompting the Pentagon to again change course and offer an older variant of the same weapon, which could now reach the battlefield by the fall. The U.S. has also instructed Ukrainian troops on a variety of other weapons systems, including the Patriot missile defense battery on U.S. territory, and held combined arms training at bases in Germany. The new weapons package announced in conjunction with the expanded training includes additional artillery rounds, rockets, missiles, and other ammunition, 30mm gun trucks, grenade launchers, and Javelin anti-tank systems. The aid brought total U.S. military assistance to Ukraine to nearly $36 billion since Biden took office in 2021. Despite vast sums of money and weapons donated to Ukrainian forces, multiple training programs hosted by the U.S. military, and Western intelligence support offered to Kiev, American officials continue to insist Washington is not a participant in the conflict. Moscow has repeatedly warned against foreign arms shipments to Ukraine, arguing they would not deter its military aims and only prolong the fighting. Finland joins NATO. What benefits can the alliance expect? While the Global Firepower Index ranks Finland's military as the 51st most powerful in the world, it is often viewed as having Western Europe's strongest artillery, possessing more pieces than France and Germany combined. On Tuesday, April 4th, Finland joined NATO, ending decades of non-alignment. With Finland's accession to the alliance, the bloc's border has gained nearly 1,300 kilometers of land and water. What does Finland have to offer to its newfound allies? Sputnik explains. How strong is Finland's military? Finland is one of the few European countries to have retained a conscription army despite decades of peace following World War II. Each year, Finland drills some 21,000 new conscripts. The term of service ranges from 180 to 362 days. Since 1994, women can also serve, albeit only voluntarily. Following active duty, they become part of its reserve corps of 280,000 soldiers. Of them, some 10,000 are called up each year for refresher courses on a rotational basis. The contract staff consists of 12,000 people, 8,000 of whom are military personnel. In case of need, nearly 900,000 Finns aged between 17 and 60 are available for service in the country of 5.5 million. The Finnish Army. Introduction to its military arsenal and capabilities. The Finnish Army, which in peacetime consists of 8 brigades, has at its disposal 239 main battle tanks, including 100 Leopard 2A6S and 139 Leopard 2A4S, 212 infantry fighting vehicles, 110 Soviet-made BMP-2 MDS and 102 Swedish-made CV-90-30 Finns, as well as some 1,100 armored personnel carriers, both on wheels and on tracks, including some 400 Soviet-made MTLS. The bulk of Finland's 2A4 tanks were acquired from Germany between 2002 and 2004, more were purchased in 2009. 100 2A6 tanks were acquired from the Netherlands between 2015 and 2019. How big is the Finnish army? Finland is sometimes referred to as Western Europe's strongest artillery and has 48 self-propelled 155 mm howitzers and 72 122 mm ones, 740 towed artillery units, including nearly 500 Soviet-made 122 hours 63 seconds, and more than 1,600 mortars, as well as 27 helicopters, 20 of which are NH-90s. The Global Firepower Index ranks Finland's military as the 51st most powerful in the world. However, the consensus is that its outsized emphasis on artillery, Finland has more pieces than Germany and France combined, potentially allows the small Nordic nation to pack a solid punch. The Finnish army is also introducing an Israeli-made ELTA counter-battery radar system in order to locate and track incoming rockets, artillery shells, and mortar fire. Finland's anti-aircraft capabilities number at least 650 missiles, but the Nordic country is in the process of procuring more from Sweden's Saab Dynamics and Israel's Rafael advanced defense systems. Its key anti-aircraft system is the NATO-compatible Norwegian NASAMS-2. As of now, Finland is also eyeing a new high-altitude anti-aircraft system, with Israel Aerospace Industries and Rafael Advanced Systems currently seen as the front-runners. Regarding UAVs, Finland has an undisclosed number of unarmed orbiter drones and is in the process of procuring up to 2,000 more, including hundreds of Parrot NFI drones, similar to those utilized by the U.S. Army. Since joining the Ottawa Mine Ban Convention back in 2012, Finland has destroyed more than 1 million anti-personnel mines, but has since partially replaced that capability with remote-controlled smart mines and area denial systems. How strong is the Finnish Air Force? The Finnish Air Force is set up into 3 air commands, each of them operating a fighter squadron. The Air Force has a fleet of 61 McDonnell Douglas F/A-18 Hornet fighter jets, which are to be replaced by 64 Lockheed Martin F-35A Lightning II jets. These are seen as the country's largest modern air military procurement and are slated for arrival starting from 2026. The main armaments include US-made AIM Sidewinders and AIM-120 AMRA-AMs and air-to-air and beyond visual range missiles, AGM-154C JSOWs, and AGM-158 AJASSMs as joint standoff weapons, as well as general-purpose GBU-class bombs like precision-guided munition. How Finland's NATO membership impacts Baltic security. The Finnish Navy is designed exclusively for coastal operations and is trained and armed to protect territorial waters in the Baltic Sea. Finland's naval forces have 8 missile craft, 4 Hamina class and 4 Rima class, 4 command vessels, 5 mine layers, 13 minesweepers, and 3 mine countermeasure vessels, in addition to smaller landing craft. Its 3 new multi-role corvettes for surface combat are currently under domestic construction and are expected to enter service by 2029. Since 1998, the Finnish Navy has also had coastal Jaegers, or Finnish Marines. Budget and bases. With an annual military budget of around $6 billion, Finland already spends just over 2% of its GDP on defense, thus meeting NATO's expenditure target for member states set back in 2014. While largely in favor of NATO membership, both ordinary Finns and political parties are split on permanent allied bases in their country. Smaller temporary deployments, similar to NATO's enhanced forward presence deployed in the Baltics, might therefore be a solution. The implications of Finland joining NATO for Russian-Finnish relations. Moscow has repeatedly warned that the expansion of the Western alliance closer to Russia's borders would make the region neither stable nor secure. Among others, Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko said that Russia would boost its military potential in the western and northwestern parts of the country in response to Helsinki joining NATO. The diplomat pledged that Moscow would take additional measures to ensure military security, if other bloc members' forces or assets were to be deployed in Finland. Iranian Interior Minister denies reports of drone attack on Defense Ministry's complex. Iranian Interior Minister Ahmed Vahidi said on Wednesday he could not confirm information about a drone attack against a complex of the country's defense ministry in the city of Isfahan, adding that further verification is needed. Earlier in the day, Iranian media reported that the country's air defense system had thwarted a drone attack against the defense ministry's complex on Tuesday night, noting that no damage had been caused to the complex. No. We do not confirm reports on the entrance of the micro-aerial vehicle and it needs verification, Vahidi was quoted as saying by an Iranian news agency. At the same time, Mohammad Reza Janizari, the deputy governor of Isfahan for political, security, and social affairs, said that there were no security incidents as claimed by media reports. Drones attack military site in Iran's Isfahan, reports say. This is not the first report of a drone attack on the Iranian Defense Ministry's facilities. On the night of January 29th, a strong explosion was also heard in Isfahan. The Iranian Defense Ministry said the blast had been caused by an unsuccessful attempt to attack one of its military facilities using quadcopters fitted with explosive charges. The Iranian air defense shot down one of the drones, while the other 2 fell into traps and exploded. Iranian media reports suggested likely involvement of Israel and the United States in the attack. Ancient Earth may have been quite slushy, and not ball of ice, study shows. The habitable planet we now populate, Earth, boasts a tumultuous 4.5 billion year history. According to the so-called snowball Earth theory, between 700 million and 600 million years ago, ice encased the entire planet. Our planet Earth was so cold millions of years back that ice shrouded its surface for the greater part. But new research by Chinese scientists is now suggesting that the so-called freeze was somewhat more mild than previously believed. In fact, the surface of our planet may have been quite slushy, according to findings published in the journal Nature Communications. This would appear to dispute the long-standing snowball Earth theory. This hypothesis has long claimed that an episode occurred sometime before 650 million years ago, during the cryogenian period, that led to Earth's surface succumbing to an overwhelming ice shield that encased it entirely. The study honed in on earlier speculations that, perhaps, this icy cover was not all that uniform, and there remained some areas of slush, or open ocean not frozen over. It was these pockets of slush that could have enabled oxygen to get through, generating what would become the incubators of living organisms. In fact, there were multiple clues to this effect, such as fossil deposits made by glaciers near the equator. These were identified as seaweed in a layer of black shale in central China's Hebei province. This could be taken as indication that habitable marine environments were more widespread billions of years ago than previously thought. According to the scientists, shale in the Nanshuo Formation, southern China, can tell quite a fascinating story about the conditions in oceans billions of years ago. The team analyzed levels of iron and the presence of nitrogen to see if oxygen was, indeed, piercing through the ocean. We found evidence of ice-free conditions at mid-northern paleolatitudes, locations before continental drift. Until now, ice-free areas had been identified only in peri-equatorial regions. Hui Song, China University of Geosciences geobiologist and lead author of the study, told the media. Great balls of fire, Earth has fifth layer as study finds 644 km wide metal ball at core. Our study shows that, at least near the end of the Marinoan snowball Earth event, habitable areas extended to mid-latitude oceans, much larger than previously thought. Previous research argued that such habitable areas, at best, only existed in tropical oceans. More extensive areas of habitable oceans better explain where and how complex organisms such as multicellular seaweed survived, Song added. Thus, the findings appear to prove that the world's oceans at the time were not completely frozen, allowing a habitat for multicellular organisms. Israel Defense Forces says 9 rockets fired at Israel from Gaza Strip, 4 intercepted. The Israel Defense Forces said on Wednesday that a total of 9 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip at Israel overnight. 4 of the rockets were intercepted by air defense systems, and another 4 rockets landed in open areas. 5 rockets were fired from Gaza at Israel tonight. 4 of them were intercepted by the IDF Aerial Defense Array, the IDF said on Twitter, adding that following the additional sirens that sounded, 4 rockets were launched from Gaza and landed in open areas. Palestinian media reported on Monday that dozens of Palestinians were injured in clashes with Israeli forces in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Palestine Center for Prisoners Studies Director Riyad Al-Ashkar told journalists that the Israeli forces detained over 200 Palestinians during the raid. U.S. announces $2.6 billion in military aid for Ukraine, including HIMARS ammunition. The Biden administration has announced a new package of military assistance for Ukraine in the amount of $2.6 billion, which includes additional ammunition for the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, HIMARS, and the Patriot Air Defense System. The U.S. Department of Defense said in a press release on Tuesday. In addition, the Biden administration will spend $2.1 billion from the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, funds to purchase additional air defense capabilities, as well as artillery and tank ammunition, mortar systems, rockets, and anti-armor systems for Kiev, the release said. Today, the Department of Defense announces critical new security assistance for Ukraine. This includes more ammunition for us-provided HIMARS, air defense interceptors and artillery rounds that Ukraine is using to defend itself, as well as anti-armor systems, small arms, heavy equipment transport vehicles, and maintenance support essential to strengthening Ukraine's defenders on the battlefield valued at up to $500 million, the release said. Ukraine will also be provided munitions for the US-supplied National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, NASAMS, 3 air surveillance radars, 10 mobile CUAS laser-guided rocket systems and 9 counter-unmanned aerial system 30mm gun trucks, the release said. What is the game-changer HIMARS rocket artillery Biden is sending to Ukraine? Moreover, the United States will provide Ukraine with 69 fuel tankers and 105 fuel trailers, 18 tactical vehicles to recover equipment, armored bridging systems and 3,600 small arms along with more than 23 million rounds of small arms ammunition, among other military assistance, the release said. The new package includes secure communications equipment, SATCOM terminals, and associated services, as well as funding for training, maintenance, and sustainment, the release added. Ex-Pentagon officer, NATO divide growing, US and EU may drastically reduce Ukraine aid by summer. The provision of security assistance under the USAI authority means that the security equipment for Ukraine will not be drawn directly from the Defense Department stocks but will instead be procured from respective manufacturers, and this process can take up to several months. According to Pentagon officials, France to develop new nuclear aircraft carrier by 2036, Defense Minister says. The new nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, designed to replace the French Navy's only operational flagship aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, will undergo its first tests at sea in 2036 to 2037, French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu said on Tuesday. The new aircraft carrier model will be developed by defense industry companies Naval Group and Technicatome. The first €5 billion, $5.4 billion, for this initiative will be allocated from the new 2024 to 2030 budget. The development of a new French nuclear aircraft carrier, which should replace the Charles de Gaulle, will begin in late 2025, early 2026, and the first tests at sea will take place in 2036-2037, Lecornu told a briefing broadcast by the Élysée Palace on Twitter. Earlier in the day, Lecornu unveiled the 2024 to 2030 military budget draft law to the government. The Defense Ministry's budget will increase to €400 billion, compared to €295 billion allocated for military spending in 2019 to 2025. The French military's total financing for the period from 2024 to 2030 will amount to €413 billion, including all off-budget expenditures. French army incapable of participating in large military operations, Defense Minister. In 2023, the French Defense Ministry's budget will reach €43.9 billion, including additional €1.5 billion requested for urgent ammunition replenishment. In 2024, the military budget will increase by €3.1 billion, and then by another €3 billion until 2027. Starting from 2028, the ministry will receive additional €4.3 billion in funding per year. U.S. imports from Russia up more than 25% in February. U.S. imports from Russia rose more than 25% in February despite continuous efforts by the United States to sanction Moscow over its special operation in Ukraine, data published by the U.S. Commerce Department on Wednesday showed. The United States bought $642.8 million worth of Russian goods in February, up from $508.6 million in February, according to the data by the U.S. Census Bureau, a unit of the Commerce Department. U.S. exports to Russia also rose to $61.2 million in February from January's $44.6 million, which marked a record low in the history of post-Soviet Russia since 1992. As Russia trade up in deck with exports at $112.8 MLN, imports at $638.4 MLN, Commerce Department. The higher import-export numbers raised the trade deficit between the two countries to $581.6 million in February, from January's $464 million, with the balance being in Russia's favor. Vocational education in China accelerates with rising skilled labor. I proved I have chosen the right path, and also proved to society that ordinary positions can achieve an extraordinary life, Ma, one of the many China Skills Award winners, said at a meeting focusing on National Extraordinary Technicians, which was held by the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security in March. The China Skills Awards, also known as the Academician of Technology, is a national professional skills promotion event held by the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security every 2 years since 1995. It is the highest national award for highly skilled personnel. Sense of achievement. 5 other China Skills Award winners also shared their experiences and encouraged more young people to forge their dreams with craftsmanship. Zhang Yuhe, also one of the winners of the China Skills Award, who won gold medals in the category of Chemical Laboratory Technology at the World Skills Competition 2022 Special Edition, recalls that entering vocational college was like opening a blind box of surprises that completely changed her life. Now she has become the youngest teacher at Henan Chemical Technician College, the only higher vocational college in the chemical technical field in Henan province. I will lead more students to live up to their potential and achieve a better life, said Zhang. Vocational education has not been favored because it requires more recognition. Many parents and candidates believe that vocational education is the last option, and only students who have no hope of getting into a bachelor's degree will choose to enroll in vocational colleges. In March, Chinese authorities issued guidance to boost the incomes and social status of skilled workers. China hopes the policies will motivate workers to sharpen their skills and make innovations. Businesses will be encouraged to provide more incentives to technical personnel, including higher salaries and stock options. Governments will grant skilled labor honorary titles and favorable treatment in areas such as housing and children's education to improve technical personnel's social status. Demand for skilled workforce. The emergence of skilled personnel in China is inseparable from the efforts made by the government to attach great importance to the work of skilled personnel. Vocational education became one of the hot topics at the 2023 two sessions and has been highlighted in many reports and plans set forth by the Chinese government. Su Ling, Vice President of Guangdong Polytechnic Normal University and also a national political advisor, said the large scale of vocational education is playing a supporting role in China's socio-economic development. For years, China has been pushing for the expansion of its vocational education system and vowed to boost vocational education quality in its 14th five-year plan, 2021 to 2025. China's revised law on vocational education in 2022 marked the first time it has been revised since it was adopted in 1996. The law promoted equal job opportunities for vocational school graduates and advanced the quality of vocational education. The revision stipulates that vocational education is as important as general education and that vocational school graduates should enjoy equal career opportunities. It also calls for enterprises to consider technical skills an essential recruitment prerequisite when hiring personnel. The Ministry of Education told a press conference held in March that the enrollment scale of higher vocational colleges and universities has exceeded that of ordinary undergraduates for 4 consecutive years, with 5,466,100 enrollments in 2022. There were over 46.55 million students at higher educational institutions, including universities, colleges, and vocational education facilities across the country, as of 2022, the ministry added. The Ministry of Education has stated that it will continue to insist on broadening the development pathway for vocational school students, offering a variety of employment and further education development paths to students who are willing and qualified. More than half of all secondary vocational school graduates nationwide continued to higher vocational, specialist, and undergraduate studies last year. While maintaining a high employment rate, nearly 1/5 of the graduates from higher vocational schools are now pursuing further studies every year, according to the ministry. Vocational education reform. Chinese authorities issued a guideline to advance reform and high-quality development of vocational education at the end of 2022. The country's vocational education reform will focus on developing a multi-form, multi-channel, and sustainable education and training system and a cooperation mechanism among governments, industries, enterprises and schools. Priority will be given to vocational education for industries such as information technology, numerically controlled machine tools and robots, aviation and space equipment manufacturing, and biomedicine. Leading enterprises and vocational schools in these industries are encouraged to enhance cooperation. More efforts will be made to raise faculty capacity in vocational schools for modern manufacturing, agriculture, and service sectors. The guideline promised more policy support for vocational education. More policy support for vocational education was promised in the guideline. Local governments are encouraged to explore new mechanisms for collaboration with the private sector in order to attract more private and industrial investment in vocational education. China developing parachute system to recover reusable rocket parts. Chinese engineers are working on a parachute system for recovering rocket boosters and fairings during launches to make the recovery of reusable rocket parts more precise and controllable. Developed by the China Academy of Space Technology, the system, which uses glide control technology, can narrow the landing range to a smaller area than the usual range of 30 to 90 kilometers. Together with landing buffering technology, it will enable the boosters and fairings to remain intact after landing on the ground. China's major launch sites are deep inland, which means that preventing fallen rocket parts from landing unpredictably, especially in areas with human activity, has become an urgent key task for scientists. Teng Haishan, a deputy chief engineer of the project, said the recovery system can also help lower the price of rocket launches, providing more economical services. In the past 2 years, China has conducted carrier rocket launches more than 50 times each year. Once such a recovery system is in place, more than 1 billion yuan, about $145 million, in launch costs can be saved each year, Teng noted. The parachute system was unveiled at a recent national innovation competition. According to its makers, the system is currently in the final stage of development. Satellite products put on sale at Chinese e-commerce platform. A number of commercial satellite products and services were released for sale at a Chinese e-commerce platform on March 31st to reduce the cost of satellite construction and popularize satellite knowledge by innovating the satellite sales model. 1U Cubic Star, a low-cost microsatellite in line with international general standards, was sold at an e-commerce platform at the price of 2 million yuan, about $290,000. With the help of network construction technology, the satellite can realize the monitoring of ocean, atmospheric environment, ships, aviation aircraft, and others. It is widely used in universities and scientific research institutes to carry out space science research and education. The buyer has placed the order and paid the deposit. Both parties have confirmed their relevant qualifications and have entered the substantive stage of contract performance, said Shen Fangjun, a spokesman for an e-commerce live streaming platform. Selfie from space. A satellite service called Space Selfie costing around 2 million yuan for 1 year and about 3 million yuan for 2 years was also provided for customers on the same day. The service will display pictures uploaded by users on the satellite screen after it enters the space, and help customers take a photo integrating their own picture in the background of the outer space. The price includes the development and launch of the satellite and its insurance. In addition, the cost of 2 years' operation and maintenance of the satellite is also covered, said Xie Tao, chairman of a commercial satellite company. Space Shuttle offers collaborative operations. Another satellite product called Space Shuttle was also offered to customers, which supports collaborative operations such as remote sensing, communication, navigation and scientific exploration. The current cost of developing and launching a commercial satellite in China is about 10 million yuan, which is still high as compared to mature international markets. By innovating the satellite sales model, experts said the cost threshold of satellite development and launch can be lowered to million yuan scale. Just spending about 2 million yuan, people can enjoy the functions of a satellite. For many scientific research institutes, even some cities, the price is within their reach, said Wang Junyi, member of Chinese Society for Science and Technology Journalism. Deutsche Bank shares plunge as global banking worries persist. Shares in Germany's largest bank, Deutsche Bank, tumbled on Friday, dragging down other major European banks and indexes as fears of contagion in the banking system spread. The Frankfurt-listed stock closed 8.5% lower, after slumping by as much as more than 14% at one point during Friday's trading session. The drop follows a spike in the cost of insuring the bank's debt against the risk of default. Its 5-year credit default swaps shot up to a 4-year high of above 220 basis points, BPS, from 142 BPS just 2 days ago, based on data from S&P Market Intelligence. Speaking in response to the sharp fall in the bank's share prices, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz sought to shore up confidence in the country's biggest lender. Deutsche Bank has thoroughly reorganized and modernized its business model and is a very profitable bank, said Scholz at a news conference in Brussels. He dismissed comparisons between Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse, saying there's no reason to worry. The capital adequacy of European banks is robust, thanks to the work we've put in over the past few years and also thanks to the efforts of the banks themselves, Financial Times reported Scholz as saying. Despite Scholz's attempts to calm market jitters, a steep sell-off in banking stocks hit European indexes on Friday. At market close, the DAX in Frankfurt lost 1.66%, the CAC 40 in France fell 1.74%, and the FTSE 100 in the UK was down 1.26%. UBS, Société Générale, Barclays, BNP Paribas, and Commerzbank were among the banks that saw their stock prices fall. The latest rout in banking shares came after the emergency rescue of Credit Suisse by UBS and in the wake of the collapse of two U.S. banks. These recent developments have caused the market to fret that regulators and central banks have yet to contain the worst shock to the sector since the 2008 global financial crisis. However, some banking analysts stressed that there was a difference between Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank. Research firm Autonomous said it was crystal clear Deutsche is not the next Credit Suisse, while JP Morgan analysts wrote we are not concerned and that Deutsche's fundamentals were solid. Paul van der Westhuizen, senior strategist at Rabobank, cited Deutsche's profitability as the fundamental difference between the two European banks, given Credit Suisse did not have a profitable outlook for 2023. Still, the bank's shares have lost more than a fifth of their value so far this month, with $3 billion wiped off its market value in the space of just 1 week. Some are expecting Europe's banking stocks to see continued fluctuation in the short term due to growing concerns of investors about the stability of the banking system. Further rate hikes by the U.S. Federal Reserve may also put more banks in an even more dire situation. Explainer: what is depleted uranium? Is it a nuclear weapon? Is it safe? The news that the UK is to send Ukraine ammunition containing depleted uranium has sparked anger, fear, and not a little confusion. Russia reacted angrily, with President Vladimir Putin warning Russia will have to respond accordingly and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu warning of a nuclear collision between Russia and the West. Besides fears arising from escalating conflict, some experts have reiterated concern over the effects of such weaponry. The campaign for nuclear disarmament has warned of the additional environmental and health disaster possible from toxic or radioactive dust being released on impact. The confusion arises from the nature of depleted uranium. Is it a nuclear weapon, by definition, or in effect? What is it used for and what does it do? Is it related to the groundbreaking recent AUKUS deal under which the UK and US will supply Australia with nuclear submarines? In this explainer, CGTN Europe will try to answer all these questions and more. When did it emerge that the UK is sending Ukraine depleted uranium? This week's global political row started with a question asked 2 weeks previously by an extravagantly bearded 90-year-old. Hereditary peer Lord Hilton tabled a question in the UK's political upper chamber asking if whether any of the ammunition currently being supplied to Ukraine contains depleted uranium. In response, on Monday, Baroness Annabel Goldie, herself a 73-year-old peer as well as the UK's Minister of State for Defence, a role not to be confused with the ministry leading Defence Secretary. Currently Ben Wallace, confirmed that some of the ammunition for the Challenger 2 battle tanks that Britain is sending to Ukraine includes armor-piercing rounds which contain depleted uranium. The ammunition was highly effective in defeating modern tanks and armored vehicles, Goldie said. What has been the reaction? Russia reacted with threats of escalation. Putin warned that if all this happens, Russia will have to respond accordingly, given that the West collectively is already beginning to use weapons with a nuclear component, but did not elaborate further. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov suggested UK politicians have lost their bearings, while Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu warned that Russia and the West were heading for potential nuclear collision, saying another step has been taken, and there are fewer and fewer left. Naturally. Russia has something to answer this with. Britain's Foreign Secretary James cleverly replied there is no nuclear escalation. The only country in the world that is talking about nuclear issues is Russia. There is no threat to Russia, this is purely about helping Ukraine defend itself. U.S.-based think tank the Institute for the Study of War claimed that Putin had portrayed the ammunition as escalatory in order to deter Western security assistance, despite the shells not containing any fissile or radiological material. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, a close Putin ally, warned Russia would retaliate by providing Belarus with ammunition containing real uranium. We need to step back from this madness. As soon as this ammunition explodes on Russian troops' positions, you will see a fearful response. It will be a lesson for the whole planet, he told reporters in a video clip. Russia does not only have depleted uranium. We have to lower this trend towards escalation in the conflict and move towards a peaceful settlement. What is depleted uranium? Uranium comes in different types and isotopes, but the really useful stuff is uranium-235, which is fissile, that is, capable of maintaining a nuclear fission chain reaction, and is therefore the engine behind both nuclear weapons and nuclear power. Uranium-235, or 235U, is irritatingly rare, but during the 1940s scientists working on nuclear weaponry discovered they could create enriched uranium with heavier concentrations of the 235U isotopes. Enriched uranium is what makes nuclear submarines move, nuclear power stations generate and nuclear bombs explode. The process of creating enriching uranium makes a byproduct called depleted uranium, depleted of its 235U, therefore less reactive and indeed less radioactive. For decades it was stored in the hope that it would be rendered useful by improved enrichment processes, but depleted uranium was to receive a quicker way back to utility, and again, it came through military technology. Depleted uranium is dense, 1.67 times as dense as lead, and dense material is good for the military in two very oppositional ways. Dense projectiles can pierce armor, and dense armor can deflect projectiles. It's that density, industry analyst Louise Jones tells CGTN, that attracts the military. That property, which has nothing to do with the fact that it was used for uranium, means it's very effective to use in a warhead, says Jones, the head of intelligence at McKinsey Intelligence Services. For the size and weight of the metal, you have a very effective penetrative weapon to be used against anti-armor or anti-tank. And that's why it's used. It's nothing to do with any small radioactive components that it may have. Depleted uranium has been used in armor-piercing ordnance since at least the 1990 Gulf War, while it is now also used in armor plating for tanks. The US M1A1 Abrams battle tank has been equipped with it since the late 1980s. In theory, any country that has a nuclear fuel industry can produce depleted uranium, explains Jones. The use of it on the warheads is mostly done by the US and the UK, where it's been a common standard components of anti-armor tank ammunition since 1990. Countries like Russia have also got access to depleted uranium and have used it on their own anti-armor ammunition as well. Is depleted uranium a nuclear weapon? Not according to the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, which says that depleted uranium does not meet the legal definitions of nuclear, radiological, toxin, chemical, poison, or incendiary weapons. Jones is also insistent that the mention of uranium may create a false impression. This shouldn't be considered in any way similar to a radioactive weapon. The UN doesn't classify it as anywhere near the threshold for a nuclear or chemical weapon. Really, it's a conventional weapon that has some characteristics of very low radioactivity. Unusually, the UK's Defence Ministry released a statement in response to Russia's claims. Alongside our granting of a squadron of Challenger 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine, we will be providing ammunition, including armor-piercing rounds which contain depleted uranium, the statement read. Such rounds are highly effective in defeating modern tanks and armored vehicles. The British Army has used depleted uranium in its armor-piercing shells for decades. It is a standard component and has nothing to do with nuclear weapons or capabilities. Russia knows this but is deliberately trying to disinform. UK Foreign Secretary James cleverly underlined the difference. It's worth making sure everyone understands that just because the word uranium is in the title of depleted uranium munitions, they are not nuclear munitions, they are purely conventional munitions. Can depleted uranium be used to make nuclear weapons? No. As its name suggests, depleted uranium has been processed to collect the 235U isotopes that make a chain reaction happen. Or as Hamish de Breton-Gordon, former commander of the UK's Royal Tank Regiment, said, depleted uranium is completely inert. There is no way that you could create a nuclear reaction or a nuclear explosion with depleted uranium. What is depleted uranium used for? Shielding and weight, usually, because of its density. Besides its military applications, it has a few carefully selected civilian applications. It is used for radiation shielding in medical radiotherapy and industrial radiography. Think of the shields that medics stand behind when giving you an X-ray, and in containers for transporting radioactive materials. It's also used in aircraft for counterweighting, because you don't want an unbalanced aircraft. What about the recent AUKUS nuclear submarines deal? The recent agreement by which the US and UK will develop nuclear-powered submarines for Australia is groundbreaking and controversial for many reasons, which we've gone into here. However, it has nothing to do with depleted uranium. Instead, and briefly, the deal is controversial precisely because it involves submarines powered by nuclear reactors, which, you'll remember from earlier paragraphs, are powered by enriched uranium. And that transfer of enriched uranium has never previously happened from a nuclear state, such as the US and UK, to a non-nuclear state, Australia. But that's a different story. What are the dangers of depleted uranium? Depleted uranium is less radioactive than standard or especially enriched uranium. Its main radioactive emission is alpha particles, which don't have enough energy to pass through the skin. But that doesn't mean it's safe. The UN Office for Disarmament Affairs describes depleted uranium as a toxic heavy metal, which possesses the same chemical toxicity properties as uranium, although its radiological toxicity is less. The chemical/radiological distinction is important because depleted uranium munitions explode upon impact and release uranium oxide dust, and those alpha particles that can't penetrate your skin can still be ingested by swallowing or inhalation. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova referenced this when calling the UK's munition exports a Yugoslavia scenario, saying the ammunition caused cancer and infected the environment. The International Atomic Energy Agency warns that sufficient amounts of ingested depleted uranium can be dangerous because of this chemical toxicity. One potential effect is kidney failure, while cancer is always a possibility with radioactive material. Just being in the vicinity of it whilst it's part of a warhead that hasn't been used doesn't really have any discernible effect, industry expert Jones tells CGTN. The issues may come from where it then becomes present in aerosols after an explosion, for example, in the vicinity after it has been used on a target. There's also some discussion about the effects after an explosion on soil or the nearby groundwater. And those after effects are slightly less clear. This could be a major concern with Ukraine hoping to reclaim its place as Europe's breadbasket as part of its economic recovery. Some countries, including Belgium, have already banned the use of uranium in ammunition. The Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, CND, has responded to the story by insisting the UK government should introduce an immediate moratorium on depleted uranium in ammunition, support a global ban on its use in conventional weapons, and pledge to clean up areas where such munitions have been used. CND has repeatedly called for the UK government to place an immediate moratorium on the use of depleted uranium weapons and to fund long-term studies into their health and environmental impacts, said CND's General Secretary Kate Hudson. However, the UK's Defence Ministry insists, independent research by scientists from groups such as the Royal Society has assessed that any impact to personal health and the environment from the use of depleted uranium munitions is likely to be low.